it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I've been asked to do a video on how to make fermented pickles. So here goes. I'm going to make it quick. Ingredients. You need garlic. You need some kind of aromatic. You know, ideal. Some people use celery leaves. I'm going to use bay leaves today because I haven't got any celery cooking around. You need something like this, but I'll explain this later. I'm going to use a carrot. You need this to hold them down. You'll see what I mean as we go along. Some herbs are nice, not essential. Of course, you need some tomatoes. I like to use Roma tomatoes. They're just sort of ideal because they're more dense, right? Less watery. For this recipe, I'm using a half-gallon jar. We've got some salt in here. Actually, I forgot to add something. So we got 3 tablespoons of salt in here and 1 tablespoon of sugar. Okay. And I boiled this maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes ago. Okay, so it's still warm, but it's not scalding hot right now. Okay, that's all you need. So now this is fermented pickles, so we're going to leave it on the counter for a week. So we just put the garlic in here. Now, a key thing when you're doing fermenting is you don't want floaters. Just the term floaters is a bit gross, but you don't want floaters. If you have any stuff, the idea with fermenting food is that you've got an anaerobic process happening, right? You've got all the action is taking place under the water. You don't want any stuff floating up at the top. So when you're cutting your garlic, you know, see how I've got them in pieces, right? In chunks. They're not smushed, because then there's stuff that can float. When you're preparing your herbs, right? Give them a good wash, give them a good shake, right? That way, I know that these are basically intact. Make sure there's no bugs, no floaters, right? In they go. For the bay leaves, I chose nice, big, good-sized ones, right? All right. So now we're ready to rock. Now, when you're adding your tomatoes, generally speaking, the best idea is to give them a couple shots with a fork, like that. When you're picking the tomatoes you're going to use, you want to find sort of the good ones, the ones that aren't compromised, you know, don't have bad spots and that sort of thing. But that's all you got to do is just prick them with a fork and do that. And that just allows the brine to get in them, right? Now it's a pretty easy process, right? Every once in a while you want to sort of stop to, you know, jam them in there a bit. Some of these tomatoes aren't perfectly ripe. It doesn't matter. Now, what do I like to use this for? Some people just take them out and eat them. I'm actually not fond of them like that. I like to use these as ingredients. You're kind of, so I mean, if you don't know anything about fermentation, you've got a salt water solution, and you've got living bacteria that live in the tomato, on the skin and in the tomato. And in that environment, in that oxygen-free environment, they proliferate, and they go to work on the actual flesh of the tomato. This is my understanding of it anyway, a layman's understanding. And they go through the fermentation process. And that changes the salt water solution into an acidic solution. And so then you've got this, so even though we haven't added any, we're going to add a tablespoon of vinegar to this. And you just do that to sort of start it off a little bit acidic. It's going to take about, it's going to take 2 or 3 days for this to begin to work, right? All right, so that's about as full as I think I can get it without really starting to, no, you don't want to be squishing your tomatoes because then you get floaters, right? So you don't want to be over squishing things. That's about as full as I can get that. Now, what's this carrot for? We're using this carrot to sort of jam it in at the top of the neck to hold everything in place. So, and I like using a peeled carrot because it's just so clean, it doesn't have any floaters on it, right? So I'm going to measure it to be just a little bit longer than the neck, like that. Okay, and I'm going to cut it lengthwise. All right, and you're just using that like a plank to hold the tomato in place. Probably could have stuffed one more tomato in this, but that's all right. See? See how I got that jammed in there? So with it like that, the tomatoes won't, right? Nothing can come out. It's going to keep everything, the water is going to come up to the top of the neck, just below the rings of the jar. And so I'm going to pour water until it's maybe almost ½ an inch from the top. And everything's going to be underwater, and those little bit of carrot will keep these from floating up, right? Because tomatoes will float in the brine solution. All right, now one more thing I need to add to this is some vinegar, okay? This is not for flavor, this is just to get an initial acidity, right? Because acidity preserves, salt preserves. It's going to take a number of days for this to be acidic. So if you go through this step, just 1 tablespoon of vinegar, you're less likely to get this gross white stuff that sometimes can form on the top of a jar. This is my technique. When I first started fermenting stuff, I would get this gross, you can still eat stuff if there, it's called Kohm, I think, K-A-H-M or K-O-H-M, I can't remember how to spell it. You can still eat stuff with it on there, but it's kind of gross. Kind of looks like something you might need a little penicillin to clear up, if you know what I'm saying. So you don't want that. It's just not appetizing, right? So here I got my salt water. This is 3 cups, 750 milliliters. Should fill this. If it doesn't, I got a bit more boiled water just kicking around, just in case. Yeah, it's a bit loosely packed, right? That's the measure. If you go 750 and it doesn't come up the neck, you haven't packed your jar well. So, a little bit of water here. Hopefully it's enough. Oh, just enough. Yeah, so everything there is underwater now. All right. Now I've got a lid here. Okay, that I've sterilized the lid. Just poured boiling water on it, right? So I got a nice clean lid. You put the lid on. I like using these plastic lids for fermenting. You just tighten it. Instead of having your hand down like this and really manhandling it, you just have 3 fingers. At least that's what I use for my strength. And just tighten it till it's snug. So by doing that, you get it's not a perfectly airtight seal, but it's enough to, as this starts to ferment, the gases will have to get out. And that amount of tightness, it can, it almost behaves like a valve. It lets the air out, but it doesn't let the air in. Or I suppose some air might get in, but I find it works very well this way. If you have a plastic lid that you've, sterilized, you tighten it like that, you won't get that white stuff on top. It'll work out really well. So yeah, just leave that on for a week on the countertop. And the other thing, you want to have it, have I got anything around here? I don't think I've got any right now, but you got to keep this in the dark. You don't want to leave the light at this. So normally I would put a brown paper bag over this. I just don't think I've got any kicking around right now. I have to go look. One thing I forgot to put on the counter before making this video. But you could put a cloth over it. You could, anything, right? You can wrap it in newspaper, but you just want to keep, because the bacteria that's doing all the work doesn't like light. So keep the light away and it'll work out just great. So that's how you make fermented pickles. Leave them on the counter for a week, then put them in the fridge or put them somewhere cool. They'll keep for 6 months to a year if you've done everything right. You can just eat them right out of the jar. I like to use them as an ingredient in various dishes. I even use the brine as well. It just adds a flavor to things that you just can't nothing else really equals that flavor. It's hard to explain because it's not something you can buy in a store, but it just adds something if you're making a pasta or even if you're doing like stir fry, Chinese food, that sort of thing. Adding one of these tomatoes or, maybe if I was doing a stir fry, I might add a tablespoon of the brine. If I was doing a pasta, I might add a 1/4 cup, like a spaghetti sauce of the brine and one of the tomatoes. it just adds something, a different fermented. It's like you've made a kind of tomato vinegar, right? That's a good way of explaining it. And it just adds an element of flavor that you probably never had before. So it's a wonderful thing to have. An old world way of preserving tomatoes, very easy to do, adds an excellent element of flavor to your food. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. And until next time, get out there, get at it. Have fun in your kitchen, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.